Okay, let's get into the why of this. Honestly, if you were a Canadian watching this in 2026, whether you rah in a basement suite in Vancouver or a semi-detached in Halifax, you probably feel like something is just off. Like the math of your life isn't adding up. And you're not wrong. Actually, wait, let me start with a visual. I want you to picture this at S4 in the morning at a border crossing right in the middle of the European Union. You've got this massive transport truck. I am talking a 40-ton beast loaded up with precision-engineered medical gear from a factory in Stuttgart, Germany. It's rolling toward the French border, and the driver, he doesn't even downshift. Honestly, he doesn't even lift his foot off the gas. There's no checkpoint, no grim-faced inspector waiting to weigh his axles, no one checking if his mirrors meet some hyper-localized French specification. He just goes. He crosses from Germany into France, then hits Spain, and eventually ends up in Lisbon, Portugal. 10 countries, 4,000 kilometers, 5 different languages, and not a single extra piece of paperwork ever touches his dashboard. It's one permit, one set of rules, one unified, frictionless economic engine. Now, snap your fingers. Snap back to reality. It's February 2026, and you're in Canada. You're sitting in the cab of a state-of-the-art rig, just idling at some dusty turnout on the border between Alberta and Saskatchewan. You aren't crossing an international frontier. You're not entering some sovereign foreign land with a different king or a different currency. You're moving between two provinces that share the exact same flag, the same federal laws, and the same national anthem. You're moving within your own house, basically. And yet, you've been sweating over a clipboard for the last hour. See, in Alberta, your truck setup is basically a triumph of efficiency. You've got these wide-base single tires. They're designed to save fuel, reduce your carbon footprint, all that good stuff. But the second your front tires touch Saskatchewan soil, well, those tires might actually make you a regulatory outlaw. Seriously. In Saskatchewan, the weight-to-width ratio for those specific tires is governed by rules that, honestly, they haven't been updated since the 80s. To keep moving, you don't just need a map, you need a literal folder stuffed with provincial permits that, let's be real, probably cost more than the diesel in your tanks. You're basically being fined for the crime of being Canadian. I call this the polite apocalypse. It's the silent dismantling of Canadian productivity. We're a nation of 40 million people, but we don't have one economy. I mean, we act like we do, but we actually have 13 small, protective, and, let's be honest, often jealous fiefdoms. We've built this internal trade wall that's invisible to the eye, but it's acting like a literal chokehold on our future. And look, I'm not just being dramatic here. The data is out. In early 2026, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business dropped some forensic-level analysis. The cumulative cost of these internal trade barriers? It's hit a staggering $210 billion every single year. That's not just some dry Ottawa number. That's roughly $500 for every man, woman, and child in this country. Think about that. That's the Canada tax you pay every time you buy milk, every time you pay rent, and every time you look at your paycheck and wonder why it feels like you're running up a down escalator. So, how did we get here? How did we become a nation of what I call zombie markets? To understand the rot, we have to do a bit of a forensic autopsy on the foundation of the country itself. Back when Canada was formed in 1867, the dream was, and wait, let me be clear, it was explicitly economic. The fathers of Confederation weren't just vibing on flags and anthems, they were trying to build a massive, unified economic powerhouse that could actually stand toe-to-toe with the industrial might of the U.S. They even put it in the fine print of our Constitution. Section 121 of the Constitution Act, 1867 says, and I'm quoting here, "All articles of the growth, produce, or manufacture of any one of the provinces shall be admitted free into each of the other provinces." It sounds pretty final, right? Admitted free. It was supposed to be our economic Bill of Rights. But for 159 years, provincial governments, usually lobbied by local monopolies, have spent their time building legal loopholes big enough to drive a transport truck through. They didn't use tanks or barbed wire, they used administrative alchemy. They realized that if they couldn't stop the goods from crossing the border, they could just stop the paperwork. And here we are in 2026, stuck in what economists call the productivity trap. While the rest of the world is forming these massive, seamless trading blocks, Canada is just fragmenting. I mean, look at the January 2026 IMF report. It's called The Internal Tariff, Canada's Silent Wealth Destroyer. And the verdict is honestly chilling. Canada effectively imposes an internal tariff on its own people that averages 9%. Let that sink in. If you buy something from the US, the average tariff is roughly 5.9%. It is literally cheaper and legally easier for a business in Toronto to trade with Florida than it is for them to trade with Calgary. We have made it harder to move a crate of apples across the Ottawa River than to move a cargo ship across the Atlantic. When you hear trade barriers, you probably think of literal walls or armed guards. In Canada, the wall is made of paper. It's a slow, suffocating layer of what we call regulatory divergence. Take the professional licensing barrier. This is where the human cost gets really real. Imagine you're a world-class ICU nurse in Nova Scotia. You've spent 15 years on the front lines, saving lives. You decide to move to BC to be closer to your parents. In a normal country, you'd pack your bags and start work on Monday. But in Canada, you're basically treated like a foreign immigrant. You have to pay hundreds in fees to a new provincial college. You have to wait months for a bureaucratic review. You essentially have to prove that a heart attack in Halifax is medically the same as one in Vancouver. Actually, wait, let me rephrase that. The IMF found that in sectors like healthcare, this hidden tariff isn't 9%. It's over 40%. We have a national doctor shortage, yet we've built these legal forts that stop doctors from moving to where the patients are. It's a demographic suicide pact dressed up as provincial jurisdiction. And it's not just the people, it's the machines. The trucking nightmare is a literal logistics crime scene. Think about the axle weight crisis. A truck hauling grain from Manitoba might be perfectly legal there, but the second it hits the Rockies, it faces a different set of rules on how much weight each individual axle can carry. Why? Because back in the 70s, some provincial engineer decided a bridge needed a specific distribution that was 500 kilograms off the national average. 50 years later, that rule is still there. The result? Truckers are forced to underload their trailers by 10% just to avoid being fined at a weigh station 3 provinces away. Think about the compounding cost of that 10% empty space. 10% more fuel, 10% more drivers, 10% more wear and tear. We are literally burning money because of rules written before the internet existed. And look, this isn't about safety, it's protectionism in a tuxedo. Every one of these minor rule differences, the shape of a toilet seat, the thickness of a drywall board, the specific height of a safety railing, it all exists to protect a local business from a better, cheaper competitor from the next province over. We've created this zombie economy. In a healthy market, the best companies grow and take over the country. They get big, they lower prices, everyone wins. But in Canada, we protect the zombies, the small, inefficient local firms, by stopping anyone else from entering their turf. Innovation just dies. Why would a Manitoba construction firm invest in high-tech 3D printing for houses if they can't sell those houses in Ontario? They stay small, they stay old-fashioned. And you stay poor. We've become a rent-seeking society. To get rich in Canada, you don't invent something, you just own a protected license. We've traded our national ambition for 13 small, comfortable monopolies, and that $80 billion number people kept throwing around, it's a ghost. In 2026, we realized it was a massive underestimate. The $210 billion cost includes the wealth we never even created because businesses just gave up. It's the factory never built in New Brunswick. It is the Waterloo startup that moved to Silicon Valley because it was easier to sell to 330 million Americans than 40 million Canadians. We're 13 people in a lifeboat, and no one is rowing because we're afraid the guy in the next seat might get to shore first. It's a regressive tax that hits the poorest hardest. If you're a billionaire, a 9% internal tariff doesn't matter. But if you're a single parent in rural Nova Scotia, that 9% is the difference between fresh fruit and canned goods. It's the polite apocalypse. And wait until we look at the specific industries, because it gets even weirder. Okay, let's keep going. If the first act was the crime scene, this is the autopsy. We're going to peel back the skin on 3 specific industries where the internal trade wall is it's a catastrophic failure of logic. Let's talk about the housing contraceptive. We talk about the housing crisis like it's some mysterious act of God, like it just happened to us. But in 2026, the forensic data is clear. It's a supply execution. We aren't failing to build because we lack wood. We're failing because we've turned building into a regulatory minefield. The Canadian Construction Association dropped a report in February 2026. This is fresh data, showing that regulatory divergence adds $45,000 to the cost of every single home built in this country. Think about that. Our red tape is a multi-billion-dollar tax on the next generation's ability to own a front door. Imagine a high-efficiency prefab housing factory in Ontario. I'm talking high-end robotics, zero waste. They can churn out a 3-bedroom home in days. They should be shipping these to BC or New Brunswick to solve the shortage, but they can't. New Brunswick has a different electrical code interpretation. BC has a different envelope testing system for insulation. Quebec has different plumbing specs. The factory has to stop the line, retool their multi-million-dollar machines, and make a special edition, New Brunswick House. The economy of scale, the thing that actually makes modern life affordable, is murdered on the altar of provincial ego. And wait, actually, let's talk about the people. We're short 108,000 construction workers. But a master electrician in Calgary still has to deal with weeks of red tape to work in Halifax. We are a country on fire, but we're stopping the fire trucks at the border to check if the hoses meet local municipal specifications. Next up, the grid of dead ends. Canada is an energy superpower. Third largest oil reserves, massive hydro, growing nuclear. But our national electricity grid? It's a series of dead ends. In a rational world, the hydro surplus from Quebec and BC would flow to Alberta and Ontario, acting as a green battery for the whole nation. But we don't live in a rational world. We live on energy islands. The problem is interties, the big wires that connect provincial grids. We just don't have enough of them. In 2025, Alberta nearly had a grid collapse during a record cold snap. BC had extra power right there, but the power couldn't move because provinces had been bickering for decades over who pays for the wire. It's actually easier for Quebec to sell power to New York City than to Ontario. We're building a house and letting every room decide its own voltage. It's expensive, it's inefficient, and it makes our climate goals basically a math problem with no solution. And then there's the poster child for all of this, the Canadian Liquor Cabinet. Ever since the 2018 R. Como case, where a guy was fined for bringing beer from Quebec to New Brunswick, we've been a global outlier. The Supreme Court basically ruled that free trade in our Constitution was more of a suggestion. We drew in a weird spot in early 2026. Most provinces have finally signed a deal to allow direct-to-consumer sales. But wait for it, it's a mess. Newfoundland and Yukon won't sign. Shipping a bottle of wine from BC to Ontario can still cost more than the wine because of markups. The CFIB reported that a Nova Scotia distillery finds it easier to sell gin to the UK, or to post-Brexit, than to a hotel in Banff. You can order a gadget from China and have it in 3 days. But try to buy Canadian wine from a fellow Canadian? You're treated like a Prohibition-era bootlegger. Look at Australia. They were just like us in the 90s, 13 stagnant states. But in 1992, they passed the Mutual Recognition Act. The rule was, if it's legal in one state, it's legal in all of them. Period. Their productivity exploded. They avoided recessions for 30 years. Look at the EU. A plumber from Poland can work in Paris with one ID. A bottle of Italian wine moves with 0 internal tariffs. They realized in the 90s that, to survive, they had to stop fighting each other. And then there's Canada. Our 2017 Free Trade Agreement has 130 pages of things we refuse to trade. It's an agreement that starts with the word no. We're told these rules protect culture or safety. But the IMF proved the opposite. Making things 9% more expensive is draining wealth from local communities. It's making us worse off. We're protecting bureaucrats, not citizens. Now, let's get into the final act, because the math is changing in 2026, whether we like it or not. So we're in the first quarter of 2026, and the global economic map, it's being violently redrawn. The era of cheap everything is over. We're entering Fortress North America. And in this colder world, Canada can't afford to be inefficient anymore. Here's the thing. In a normal economy, a business starts in a garage, conquers its city, then its province, then the nation. By the time it goes global, it has the muscle memory of serving a market of 40 million people. It's big enough to compete. But in Canada, companies hit a regulatory ceiling. A Waterloo startup that wants to expand into Quebec has to hire a compliance team just to navigate different privacy and labor laws. The cost is so high that most founders don't bother. They stay small. Or they sell out to an American giant the second they hit a $50 million valuation. We're not a country of small businesses because we love it. We're a country of small businesses because we've made it legally expensive to get big. We are pruning our own economic forest. But wait, there is actually a glimmer of hope. On January 29th, 2026, the IMF dropped that bombshell report. It confirmed that our internal tariff is 9% nationally. But here's the kicker. The IMF says if we eliminate these barriers, we'd get a 7% boost to our real GDP. That is a $210 billion gift just sitting on the table. It's not a one-time stimulus. It's a permanent raise for the whole country. Let's talk about your life. $210 billion means the productivity dividend is worth about $5,100 per person. For a family of 4, that's $20,400. That's not just extra money. That's your mortgage for 4 months. That's university tuition. That's the buffer against the cost of living. This wealth isn't being taken by a villain. It's being wasted by a system. It's the cost of trucks idling and nurses waiting. The Bank of Canada warned us in February 2026. Labor growth is stalling. Fertility is low. We can't just grow by adding more people. We have to grow upward by being efficient. Every hour a trucker waits for a permit is lost national wealth. Every dollar spent on a compliance consultant is a dollar not spent on AI or higher wages. In 2026, inefficiency is a luxury we can't afford. So, How do we tear down the wall? First, mutual recognition. The CMRA needs to take full effect by December. If it's safe in one province, it is legal in all. No more double testing. Second, the as of right standard. We need to take the Ontario model national. Allow professionals to work within 10 days of moving. Third, alcohol liberation. Hold the provinces to that May deadline. If we can't ship a bottle of wine, we can't build a country. We have a choice. On one side, status quo Canada. 13 high-walled gardens. Opportunity limited by geography. Polite on the surface, but cannibalizing its own future. On the other side, unified Canada. The dream of 1867. 41 million people moving with frictionless grace. A made in Canada. Label that actually means something. The walls are cracking. The math is undeniable. The $210 billion is waiting. You're not crazy for feeling like the system is broken. You're just living in a nation that's taxing its own pulse. It's time to stop being polite about our decline. It's time to stop paying the Canada tax. It's time to tear down the wall. The verdict is yours. Wait, one last thought before I go. I promised you detail, and honestly, we haven't even scratched the surface of the administrative alchemy that's holding us back. Think about the construction sector again. I mentioned that $45,000 tax on new homes, but let's look at why it's so specific. In Canada, we have a national building code. Sounds great, right? Except it's not actually national. It's a model code. Each province then takes that model and, well, they tweak it. They add their own specific requirements for everything from the thickness of drywall to the specific type of venting required in a laundry room. Now, if you're a small-time contractor building one house at a time, maybe you don't care. But if you're trying to build at the scale we need, I'm talking thousands of units using modern industrial methods, this is a nightmare. It means you can't have a standardized assembly line. You can't use the same CAD designs. You can't even buy the same bulk materials. You're essentially building every house as a one-off prototype. It's like if Apple had to design a different iPhone for every state in the US. No one would have an iPhone. They'd cost 10 grand. And that's what we've done to housing. We've made it a bespoke, artisanal product in a world that needs mass production. And who pays for that? Not the bureaucrats who write the rules. You do. You pay for it in 40-year mortgages and a quality of life that's slipping through your fingers. And don't even get me started on the licensing gatekeepers. I mentioned nurses, but it's everyone. It's architects, it's engineers, it's heavy equipment operators. We have this weird obsession with provincial standards, as if the laws of physics or biology change when you cross the border from Manitoba into Ontario. Actually, wait, let me rephrase that. It's not an obsession with standards. It's an obsession with gatekeeping. Every provincial licensing board is essentially a tiny monopoly. They collect fees, they control the supply of labor, and they have zero incentive to make it easier for people to move. If a doctor from Quebec wants to work in Alberta, the Alberta board doesn't see a solution to a healthcare crisis. They see a competitor who hasn't paid their entry fee yet. It's a joke, right? We have people dying on wait lists while perfectly qualified doctors are sitting in the next province over, filling out forms and waiting for credential verification. This is the hidden wiring of a declining nation. We've prioritized the comfort of the gatekeeper over the survival of the citizen. Let's dig deeper into this idea of the zombie economy. In a healthy economy, wealth is created by innovation. You find a way to do something faster, cheaper, or better, and you're rewarded for it. But in a rent-seeking economy, which is where Canada is heading in 2026, wealth is extracted by owning a protected asset. This could be a taxi medallion, a milk quota, or a provincial monopoly on liquor sales. When you protect these rents, you're essentially telling the world, in this country, it's better to own the past than to invent the future. And this is why our productivity is cratering. Why would a Canadian venture capitalist put money into a risky new tech startup when they can just buy another block of condos in Toronto and watch the price go up because the supply is protected by red tape? Why would a company invest in new machinery when they can just lobby the provincial government to keep their competitors out? We've built a system that rewards inertia, and the cost of that inertia is being billed directly to you. The $210 billion is waiting. The $5,100 dividend is sitting on the table. It's 2026. The world is changing. Fortress North America is being built. It's time for Canada to finally become the country it was meant to be. Tear down the wall. I'm out.